There was a knock at the door. It was 2 a.m. Outside stood a woman, shivering in the cold. And she said just one thing. "You feel familiar?" That moment when a stranger stepped into his life was actually the very first step toward taking everything back. Please don't forget to subscribe. When Adrian Weber woke up, it was 2:03 a.m. The house was dark, and outside was filled with whispers, the howling wind, the sharp clang of a loose piece of metal on the roof, and, yes, a door sound. Again, firm, but not rushed. There was no one else in the house, just his 8-year-old daughter Elena, who was fast asleep. Who would be knocking at this hour? Especially with that kind of quiet insistence? He got up hesitantly, grabbing the support cane he always kept near his knee, a habit left over from an old accident. He quietly walked to the hallway, pulled the curtain aside without turning on the light. It was dim, but he could see enough. A young woman stood on his porch, completely still like a statue. She wore a thin, dark blue dress. Her shoulders were shaking, her hair plastered to her face by the wind. Her bare arms looked almost purple from the cold. And then it happened. She lifted her head, their eyes met, and only 3 words left her lips in almost a whisper. "You feel familiar?" Adrian opened the door. The woman in front of him looked like she had just come back from the edge of something. Her face was delicate but worn, her lips cracked, one shoe missing. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and steady. She gave a slight nod, but didn't seem like she was going anywhere. She didn't turn around, didn't speak again. She just kept standing there, shivering on the doorstep. Adrian stepped aside. "Come in," he said. It was instinct, maybe just a human reaction, or maybe something else. The woman stepped inside without hesitation. As she entered, her eyes welled up with tears at the warmth, as if it wasn't her body, but her soul that had started to thaw. The house was simple. A few children's drawings, shelves packed with books, an old but clean sofa. He sat her down, brought a blanket, turned the heater up a little. Then he went to the kitchen and started making tea. The woman just sat there, hiding her hands under the blanket. Her eyes were still, but they followed his every move. "My name's Adrian," he said, sitting beside her. "My daughter Elena's asleep in the other room. There has to be a reason you're here at this hour." She bowed her head and took a long breath. Then, slowly, she spoke. "My name is Nora, and I'm not exactly sure why I'm here. But when I saw you, something inside me, it felt like it knew you." Adrian didn't say anything. He just listened. In that moment, he realized it wasn't just her hands that were frozen, her past was too. A mystery still wrapped in cold. Her dress looked like something expensive. Her makeup had run, but there were still traces of old glamour on her face. It was like she'd escaped a party, or something much worse. Nora pulled one arm out from under the blanket. There was a cut up to her elbow, freshly bleeding. Adrian quickly brought the first aid kit and gently cleaned and wrapped the wound. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked. Nora looked away. "No," she said softly, "but I almost hurt myself. If I had kept going." Adrian handed her the tea. "You're here. You're here tonight. The rest, we'll talk in the morning." In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Even if names changed and pasts stayed hidden, that night, that 2 a.m. moment had already become an irreversible beginning. And in the dim kitchen light, a stranger wrapped in a blanket and a man with a haunted past had both found shelter in the same silence for the very first time. Morning didn't come with an alarm, it came with a child's laughter. Elena's little footsteps pattered down the hallway and into the living room. Adrian had gotten up early to make breakfast before his daughter woke, like always. But this morning wasn't going to follow the usual routine. When he came back from the kitchen, what he saw stopped him in his tracks. Elena was curled up, not with her mom, but with a stranger. And that stranger was still asleep. Nora's hair was messy, tangled up in the blanket. But her face looked peaceful. Like, for the first time in a long while, she'd finally been allowed to just stay somewhere. Elena looked up at Adrian. "Daddy, who is she?" she asked, all innocence. There was a short silence as Adrian stepped closer. Then he said, "This is Nora. She knocked on our door last night. She needed help." Elena nodded like that made perfect sense. Then she snuggled back into Nora's side. Adrian didn't say anything else. He didn't want to break the moment. Sometimes, a child's unconditional love knew the right answer before anyone else could. A few minutes later, Nora's eyes opened. She stared up at the ceiling, then noticed Elena's head resting against her. Then her gaze met Adrian's. I'm sorry. She started to say, but didn't finish. Her eyes just filled with tears. Adrian handed her a warm glass of milk. Good morning, he said. We're just sitting down for breakfast. They didn't talk much during breakfast. Elena kept sneaking looks at Nora, and Nora gave shy but genuine smiles back. At one point, Elena suddenly blurted out, Hey, do you think we could build a snowman after breakfast? Nora glanced at Adrian, surprised. He winked. If Nora wants to, why not? And for the first time, Nora laughed out loud. Yes, she said. That sounds lovely. While Elena stayed inside a bit longer to look for a carrot for the snowman's nose, Adrian took the chance to learn more about Nora. What happened last night? He asked quietly. Nora looked down at the floor. There was a wedding, but it wasn't for me. Everyone was there, but no one saw me. I was just someone, a name, a figure, a title, something instead of someone. Adrian nodded. So you ran? No, Nora said. I walked, so I wouldn't go back to the place where I'd lost myself. And then, I stopped in front of the only house with the lights on. I don't know why, but when I stood at your door, it felt like I'd stood there years ago. Adrian looked at her closely. What she said wasn't about some one-night escape, it was the result of years of quiet rebellion. She might have been wealthy, maybe educated, maybe even famous. But none of that mattered now. She was simply someone who had gotten lost in the wrong kind of life. When the snowman was finished, Elena wrapped an old scarf around its neck. What should we name him? She asked. Nora answered right away. Leon. Why Leon? Adrian asked. I don't know, Nora replied. Maybe he just looks strong. The day flew by, but Nora's phone stayed silent. No calls. Or maybe there were plenty, but she didn't want to look. That afternoon, while Adrian went outside to check the heater on the roof, Nora stayed in. She flipped through a few books on the shelf in the living room, then noticed some papers on the coffee table. It was an application form for a scholarship for Elena. The bottom part was unfinished, but one line in Adrian's handwriting stood out. Elena is made of light. And right below that, the past was a battle. The future could be her victory. Reading that made something ache inside Nora. For the first time, she was witnessing this kind of effort from a father up close. A kind of responsibility money couldn't buy. And maybe a kind of trust. When Adrian came back inside, Nora had gently placed the form back where she'd found it. If you want, I can help, she said suddenly. With the application. I've read a lot of things like this before. I've worked in that field. Adrian looked surprised at first. Then he smiled. So helping others comes as naturally to you as writing, huh? I guess so, Nora said. As long as I'm writing for the right people. And right then, for the first time, Nora wasn't just a guest anymore. She had become part of the house. She hadn't told her story yet, but she wasn't hiding it either. She was just holding it, waiting for the right moment to share. And maybe, for the first time, her story hadn't started in the wrong place after all but at the right door. 2 days had passed, and Nora still hadn't left. The first night had been coincidence, the second kindness. But by the third day, it had turned into a decision. Adrian hadn't asked, when are you leaving? And Nora hadn't said, can I stay a little longer? It was an unspoken agreement between them. The house, compared to the storm outside, felt too quiet, too warm, and too right. That morning, Adrian had left early for work. It was one of his smaller handyman jobs fixing an old man's stove. Elena was at school, and Nora, for the first time, was alone in the house. At first, she felt a little uneasy. Trying to figure out the layout of a stranger's kitchen felt like some kind of test. But then, that unfamiliarity turned into a strange kind of familiarity. Everything was simple and in its place, mugs carefully lined up, notes stuck to the fridge, a dried-up basil plant in the corner of the little kitchen window. These were the quiet, real pieces of life. Just as Nora was sipping her tea, the landline rang. Yep, they still had a landline. No number showed on the screen. Instinctively, she didn't pick it up. The ringing stopped, and the silence came back. But something stirred in her. Maybe cutting ties with the outside world wasn't as easy as it seemed. Later that afternoon, Elena came back from school and ran straight into Nora's arms. I drew you in art class today, she said proudly. We were riding a dragon together. Your dress was flying out like wings. Nora felt a lump in her throat. Can I show you? Elena asked. Of course, said Nora. It'd be an honor to ride a dragon with you. 2 hours later, when Adrian came home, he found them on the floor in the living room. surrounded by pastel crayons and drawings. Nora's cheeks were smudged with color. Elena had a ribbon in her hair. The scene felt so real that the first thing that popped into Adrian's head was, I wish this was a photo. But then he thought maybe some memories are just too alive to fit inside a picture. Over dinner, Nora showed Adrian a draft of the scholarship application she'd prepared for Elena. Adrian stayed quiet for a moment, flipping through the pages. Then he looked up. This is professional level work. Actually, maybe a little too professional. Nora paused. Then she admitted, I used to be a corporate consultant. I worked in communications for big companies. I used to shape proposals, write strategic reports. I even built public images for a few millionaires. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Yeah. But somewhere in all that success, I lost myself. I made others shine while I dimmed. And then someone came along, someone who wanted to put me on a stage. But I was just a look to him. He wasn't investing in my story, he was investing in my name. Adrian asked gently, You were engaged, weren't you? Nora lowered her head. Yes. But next to him, I was just a face, not a voice. Adrian's gut told him he could trust her. Still, as a father, he was cautious. And now he asked, Is that man still trying to reach you? He probably is, Nora said. But I've shut my phone off. The media, lawyers, maybe even gossip columnists. They're all looking for me because now I'm the missing piece of the story. But I didn't just want to disappear. I wanted to find myself again. And this is the only place where I've actually felt that. That night, after Elena had gone to bed, Adrian stepped out onto the porch. It was cold, but his thoughts were even heavier. Nora joined him quietly, wrapped in an old cardigan. Do you think it's okay for me to stay? She asked suddenly. For Elena. For you. Adrian tilted his head, eyes fixed on the distance. I'll be honest. I haven't opened my door to many people in my life. But the way you knocked that night, it felt like you sensed something was missing in here. And maybe your missing piece was with us. Nora held her breath. Tomorrow, everything could change. Your past might catch up to you. But I'm not going to try and push you away. I just need to be sure my daughter won't be hurt. Nora closed her eyes. Hurting her would be the last thing I'd ever do. I'm starting to believe that, Adrian said. But the truth, real truth, it unfolds with time, not all at once. And in that moment, the silence between them wasn't a wall, it was trust. But that same night, a car pulled up outside. Its engine stayed on, headlights pointed at the house. Someone was inside, staring, a shadowy figure unrecognizable, but waiting, watching, patient. And no one yet knew that the person in that car was a visitor from the past. Not yet. The next morning started like any other. Elena walked into the kitchen for breakfast with a hair clip she'd put in herself, strutting around in her striped pajamas like a little superhero. Nora was slicing the cake she'd baked the day before. Adrian was getting ready to take apart the old water heater in the backyard. Just an ordinary morning, so ordinary that no one even noticed how ordinary it was. Until he saw the envelope in the mailbox. Adrian leaned out from the porch and opened the box. Usually, it was just a few bills, some ads, maybe a letter from Elena's school. But this envelope, it was thick, elegant, and hand-addressed. No return name, just one word written on it. Nora. When Adrian came inside, his face had darkened. He handed the envelope to Nora. This came. The moment Nora saw it, the color drained from her face. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She paused for a few seconds before opening it. And in those seconds, Adrian's look was clear. What is it? Without a word, Nora walked to the corner of the kitchen, took a deep breath, and opened it. Inside was a document, short but painfully clear. A report from a private consulting firm that specialized in tracking missing persons. At the bottom was her lawyer's name, and a note that read, If you reveal your location before it hits the press, the damage will be minimal. Adrian stepped closer without a word. They're after you, aren't they? Nora lowered her head. Yeah, or more like, they're after who I am. They want me to come back. The media is picking apart my silence for a story. That man, he's not my fiancé anymore, but he's afraid of his image falling apart. Me disappearing cast a shadow on his shiny little world. And now they want you back to erase the shadow? Nora looked up. No, they want me to swallow the shadow. They'll offer me that life again. Maybe an apology, maybe a payoff. But what they really want is my silence. Adrian didn't look away from her. So what are you going to do? I don't know, said Nora. But I don't want anything to happen to the place where Elena smiles like that. And I don't want to drag you into this either. Right then, there was a knock at the door. It was 10:42 a.m. Nora went pale. As Adrian headed toward the door, he glanced at her. She just nodded. They're here for me. When he opened the door, a tall man with a polished face stood there. He wore an expensive coat and held a leather briefcase. The engine of his car was still running like he'd come to deliver a message, not to stay. Adrian Weber? Who's asking? I'm Mark Voss, legal counsel to Mr. Daniel Roth. I'm requesting a meeting with Ms. Nora Baumgartner. Adrian didn't move from the doorway. You're a little late for a meeting. Mark smiled politely. Being late doesn't cancel intent. I'd like just a few minutes of civil conversation with her. It's important. At that moment, Nora appeared. She hadn't even had time to tie up her hair. She stepped forward quietly. Mark, I have no more business with the man you represent. Tell him I only brought a document. The man interrupted. An agreement. If you don't speak to the media, if you keep your silence publicly, we'll transfer all your shares back to you. Plus, we'll guarantee an independent life. Your location will stay private. Your family, this new life you've built won't be put at risk. Adrian's face hardened. Family. Mark turned to him. Yes. No offense, Mr. Weber. But every detail the press learns will affect that little girl in there too. If you want her safe, stop, said Nora. Her voice didn't shake this time. That deal in your hand, it's just hush money. The more I stay quiet, the more powerful he becomes. But now, I have a home. A life without names, without titles, without shares. A real life. And to be part of it, I left that muddy past behind. Mark nodded slightly. Then you'll be alone in this war of silence. Nora stepped forward. You're wrong, she said. I'm not alone. The man whose door I knocked on that night opened it. And it wasn't just the door to a house, it was the door to something real. Mark stepped back. He got into his car. Their eyes met one last time. Then he drove off. The door closed. Silence fell. A single tear slipped down Nora's cheek. What did I just do? She said. It feels like I set fire to this home. Adrian stepped closer and simply said, No, you built this home. With us. And now, it's time to defend it. At that moment, Elena's voice came from inside. Nora, are we building another snowman? Nora wiped her tears, smiled. No, this time we're building a castle. A big one. And as the snow began to fall again outside, inside the house, was no longer just a place to hide but the heart of someone ready to fight. The next day, the rain began. Snow had a way of covering everything with silence. But rain forced you to face things. The drops hitting the roof reminded you time was passing. They whispered that life was still flowing beneath the ground you stood on. And that morning, Nora woke up with that exact awareness. She was wrapped in one of Adrian's old shirts, quietly staring out the window. Mark was gone, yes, but the truth he left behind still hung in the air. She couldn't hide anymore. At the breakfast table, Elena looked up like she'd noticed something. Nora, why do you always stare out far away? Are you waiting for someone? Nora looked down at her tea. Maybe. I'm waiting for myself, she said. Adrian furrowed his brow, but didn't say anything. He too had woken up with a different kind of resolve that morning. Around noon, Nora came up to Adrian. I need to go somewhere, she said. Alone. Just make sure where you're going doesn't hurt you, Adrian replied. No, said Nora. This time I'm going to hurt my past. She only took her bag and a worn-out notebook. Adrian stayed back with Elena. When the door closed, Nora didn't look back. Because for the first time, leaving didn't mean running away. Nora walked slowly but deliberately toward the city center. When she entered the tall building that used to house her office, the security guard recognized her. His eyes widened, but he didn't say a word. She took the elevator to the 27th floor. On that floor, the company still bore her last name. In huge letters on the door it read, Baumgartner and Roth Strategies. She walked in. The receptionist jumped up. Ms. Baumgartner? Where's Daniel? She asked. The doors opened. Daniel Roth appeared, hands in his pockets, wearing that usual measured smile. Nora, finally, he said. You surprised me. This is a bold move. But stop, said Nora. I don't need to hear a single word from you. The press wants you, Daniel said. Investors are asking questions. Without you, they lose confidence. But we can rebuild the image. Together. One statement, a few interviews. Nora pulled out a document from her bag. This is my decision. A signed statement declaring I've officially stepped down from the company, and I want my name removed from all communications and ownership. Also, I'm donating all of my shares. The color drained from Daniel's face. Donating? To who? To a housing project for homeless women. There's a place far from here. A place that feels like a real home. And that's where my investment goes now. Daniel leaned forward, gripping the table in a flash of anger. What happened to you? He said. You were success. You were the top. And now you know what you are? A missing face from a legend. Nora smiled. No, Daniel. Now, I'm finally my own face. On her way back, she didn't get caught by the press. She walked quietly through the rain. She didn't carry an umbrella. She wanted to get wet. Every drop felt like it was washing away an old identity. And with every step, she got closer to Adrian's door. By the time she got home, it was almost evening. Adrian was on the porch, holding a hammer, replacing bolts on the old swing. Nora walked up silently. It's done, she said. Adrian didn't ask. What's done? The past. I took back my name, my choice, my shadow. I'm not a side character in anyone else's story anymore. Adrian didn't say anything. He just pulled a key from his pocket. I made this today, he said. A second key. For the house. Nora looked into his eyes. Is this an offer? It's trust, he said. But if you still want to stay, don't answer me. Ask Elena. Right then, they heard the sound of small feet inside. Elena ran over and hugged Nora. Nora, I drew you something new, she said. There are 3 of us now, but this time we're all under the same roof. And there's a big light on the roof. Because you're the light of our house now. Nora knelt down and kissed her on the forehead. And I'll never let that light go out. That evening, for the first time, Adrian asked Nora to cook dinner with him. The kitchen filled with quiet laughter. The hum of the pot lid drowned out all the sounds of the past. But at the end of the night, another envelope was placed in the mailbox. It only said, "The press is ready. They're just wondering what you'll say." Adrian brought it inside without opening it. Tomorrow, he said to himself. The answers will come tomorrow. And that night, for the first time, the rain had stopped. The next morning, Nora made a decision. She no longer owed it just to Adrian or Elena but to herself. To show up instead of hide. To speak instead of stay silent. To walk in her own light, not in the shadow of the past. That envelope left at the door didn't scare her. On the contrary, it moved her to act. As she sat in the small kitchen, Adrian sat across from her. Nora held her coffee, took a deep breath. Today, I'm going to make a statement, she said. But not the way they want me to. Not to the press. To people, but the real way. Adrian nodded. How are you going to do it? I'm not just reclaiming who I was. I'm starting something new. I know that now after talking to you. This house, you, Elena, everything that brought me back to myself started here. So I want my message to start here too. Adrian smiled. All right, what do you need? A video. Honest, simple, no filters. I'll tell who I am, what I've been through, why I was silent, and why I won't be anymore. I'll write my own story, not anyone else. That afternoon, Nora cleared off Adrian's desk. She picked up her phone and turned the camera on. In the background, Elena's drawings were pinned to the wall. Without trembling, without tears, but with complete and raw honesty, she spoke. I'm Nora Baumgartner. I used to be the woman everyone looked at, but no one really saw. The dresses I wore, the seats I sat in, the multi-million-dollar contracts I signed, they all looked like they belonged to me, but I wasn't inside any of them. One day, standing in the middle of it all, I realized I had left myself behind. Her eyes widened as she looked into the lens. I didn't run. Running is fear. I chose to walk. On a cold night, I knocked on a door. And that door didn't just give me warmth, it gave me truth. Now, I'm telling my own story. To those who tried to buy my silence, I've taken my name back. I've taken my life back. And this life is now about helping, about being a light, about standing together. She turned off the camera. Her eyes were full, but not a single tear fell. Adrian walked in. Should we post it? Nora nodded. But only on one condition. Let's not post it just from me, let's share it from the page of the project we built together. I'm not alone anymore. That evening, the social housing initiative they named Northlight Project started gaining thousands of interactions online. Among those who watched the video were ordinary people, old colleagues, and unexpectedly, a former lawyer from Daniel Roth's company messaged Nora. I want to stop being silent too. Can I help? Within days, donations started coming in. women's shelters, temporary housing programs, networks of volunteer consultants. Nora's movement was growing, but she had made a promise to herself. No matter how big it got, she would never stop listening to the small voices at home. One morning, Nora and Adrian were painting the kitchen together. Elena stood on the table, singing. At one point, Nora set the brush down and turned to Adrian. "I want to ask you something," she said. Adrian smiled. "Anything, just don't propose." "I'm not ready for that." Nora laughed. "No, something harder. Will you keep building this life with me? But one brick at a time. Just us. No explanations. No compromises." Adrian paused, then pointed to the glowing rooftop in one of Elena's drawings. "I think we already started." That night, as they sat together on the porch, Nora pulled out a notebook. On the cover was the house Elena had drawn. She opened it. The pages were blank. "I'm going to start writing the chapters of this new life in here," she said. Adrian looked on, curious. "I already have the first sentence," Nora added. Adrian asked, "What is it?" Nora looked him in the eye. "A woman, a man, and a little girl were born again under a light. And that light, the one that had been shining the night she knocked at 2 a.m., the one that welcomed Nora in as she shivered, was still on that night. But now, not to guide a stranger, to protect a home, a future, and a life built by choice. And this time, meant to stay on forever."